I don't think enough people are talking about this when it comes to a heart that is light and a life that is emotionally free. And I think this could be the unlock that sets major things into motion for you. Some time ago, I remember hearing one of those names that's a blast from the past, when you haven't thought about someone for a while. And I heard this name, and suddenly I felt funny in my body. Suddenly, I felt a little bit resentful because I remembered something that this person had said some time ago. And what I realized in that moment is that I had never really forgiven this person for what she had said and what she had done. Forgiveness is such a major part of our emotional freedom. In fact, I think it was the author Anne Lamott who first said, not forgiving, unforgiveness is like drinking rat poison and waiting for the rat to die. In other words, you want these bad things to happen, or at least natural consequences to happen to someone who has done you wrong. But when you hold on to that grudge, when you keep holding that against them, when you keep holding that bitterness and unforgiveness, it actually affects you more than it does the other person. So let's talk about what forgiveness is, because we can get this wrong and it really hinders us in our emotional freedom. Forgiveness is just this. It's recognizing wrong, but releasing the wrongdoer from your revenge. It's recognizing wrong. And it highlights the fact that wrong was done. Otherwise, there would be nothing to forgive. However, it's releasing the wrongdoer from your revenge. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't natural consequences. That doesn't mean that God will not have his justice. We know that God's going to have his justice, and that actually probably should make all of us a little bit uncomfortable because we, on some level, are all wrongdoers as it is. But God's going to have his justice. We don't have to seek justice. That's why forgiveness is recognizing wrong, but it's releasing the wrongdoer from your revenge. Now, sometimes we can get stuck because we think that forgiveness is something that forgiveness actually is not. And it's important to mention these three things that forgiveness is not before we talk about, well, what do we do to forgive? And how can we know that we've actually forgiven someone? Again, for the good of our heart and our emotional health. First, forgiveness is not pretending that nothing happened. A lot of times we'll resist the idea because we'll say, well, I could never forgive the person who abused me. I could never forgive the person who stole from me. I could never forgive my mom or my dad who did this terrible thing to me and set my life in motion in this way. Because we think, well, that's letting them off scot-free, that's pretending that nothing ever happened, when forgiveness actually is the opposite. Forgiveness highlights the fact that something wrong was done. In fact, a great wrong was done. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to forgive. So when we choose to forgive, we are actually holding very clearly out front, hey, this really hurt. This really was wrong. This was unjust. This really was evil. And when we do that, forgiveness eliminates our revenge. It's recognizing the wrong, but it eliminates our revenge. Here's the second thing that forgiveness is not, and that's trusting the person in the same way again. Sometimes we think, well, if we forgive someone, then the relationship has to go back to how it was before. And that's just not true. Again, forgiveness is recognizing wrong and it's releasing someone from revenge. But that doesn't mean you don't set boundaries into place. That doesn't mean you don't set healthy limits into place. In fact, we want to do this when we have been hurt before, or when someone has broken trust or lied to us before. There need to be boundaries. Think about a marriage rebuilding after an affair. Is forgiveness possible? Recognizing, yes, that was evil, that was unjust, that was betrayal, that was wrong. Yeah, it's possible. But there need to be boundaries in place. There needs to be a process of rebuilding trust, open lines of communication, and that is okay. You can forgive and still have boundaries. You can forgive and not trust the person in the same way. Forgiveness is not trusting them in the same way or going back to the relationship how it was before. The third thing that forgiveness is not eliminating all consequences. I remember when our church building was broken into and we didn't know who the perpetrator was, but this individual, a group of individuals, broke a window and stole our soundboard as well as a pretty nice keyboard that we had. We forgive the person. In fact, we want them to come to a rescuing knowledge of the grace of Jesus Christ, right? That all of us are wrongdoers and that forgiveness is possible. We forgive that person, but we still let the police do their thing, do their investigation, try to find fingerprints and go the whole 9 yards to bring justice to the situation. We were not looking for revenge, but there were still consequences. Think about somebody who knows a perpetrator in prison, and that perpetrator has done terrible things, maybe to a child. That family can forgive the perpetrator, but that person is still serving his or her time in prison. Forgiveness is releasing your revenge, but it doesn't eliminate all the consequences, legal or natural, as it were. And it's really important to recognize those 3 things that forgiveness is not. It's not pretending nothing happened. It's quite the opposite. It's not trusting the same person. It's not trusting the person in the same way again. There can be boundaries. And it doesn't eliminate all consequences, legal or natural. Remember, forgiveness is just recognizing wrong and releasing the person from your revenge. So, what do you need to do to forgive someone? Well, I'll let you know a secret. Sometimes it does feel like a weight is lifted, and it can feel like from night to day this immediate change. But a lot of times, it's not an immediate thing that you feel. Rather, instead of being a momentary decision, it's the decision to commit to a journey. Every time the thought comes up, every time you want to speak badly, every time you feel funny about a person, you will again release that person as long as it takes. As in the example of this person that I hadn't thought about in a long time, but as soon as I heard her name, she had been a supervisor of a job that I had years previous, I realized, gosh, I have not released her. Commit to releasing the person. It's a journey over time. So how will you know that you've forgiven someone and experience a lighter heart and a more emotionally free life? Well, the first way that you'll know that you've forgiven someone is in your mind. When you constantly think about somebody and the wrong that they have done to you, and it is consuming, that has a hold on you. In fact, that hold on you is something that you are holding on to. And when you forgive, you're releasing that hold. You'll know that you've forgiven someone when you think less often about the wrong that was done. In fact, you'll really know that you've forgiven someone when you think of a person, you actually want good things for that person rather than getting stuck on the wrong that they have done to you or said to you. One way to know that you've forgiven someone is with your mind. A second way to know that you've forgiven someone is in your muscles. What do I mean by that? Well, when you hear a name or you go to a place, when you see a person and you get physically resentful, physically tense, and I'm not talking about because it's unsafe and there's trauma. That's a different conversation. I mean because you are focused on what that person said, what that person did. You have not released that person. One way that you'll know that you've forgiven them is when you hear their name or you're in their presence at a family party or whenever you have to be with them at your job or some other part of your life, and you no longer get that physical discomfort. That's a good indicator that your heart has released them. And when your heart releases them, your body releases that tension as well. So you'll know you've forgiven someone with your mind when you think less often about the wrongdoing and you actually think good things for them. You'll know that you've forgiven someone in your muscles when you literally do not feel the distress like you did before. You've released them. But a third way you'll know that you've forgiven someone is with your mouth. I remember years ago, A leader invited my wife and I to grow under him, and then within a couple of months, he actually left. And for a long time, that was a resentful thing in my heart. I was kind of bitter because it wasn't just a small move. We moved countries, we moved locations of our church, we moved our family, we moved a whole lot of things to grow under this leader. And then it felt kind of like he abandoned us and was just kind of using us to put into a certain place. Now, I'm telling you this to give you context. I'm not telling you this because I'm resentful about it now. But here's the point. At the time, I realized for about 2 years, when I talked about this individual, I would talk about what he did and how he made us feel. And it wasn't until I was actually at a retreat when I sensed God saying, "You've talked enough about this. Release it. You don't have to talk about this anymore." And I realized forgiveness also has to do with our mouth, the things that we talk about. Our mind, what we think about, our muscles, how we feel in our body toward the wrongdoer, but also our mouth, how we talk about and what we talk about when we're talking about the person who has done us wrong. There's a woman that I work with, and she came to me because of some issues in her relationship. We're doing individual, though she is in a relationship, and there was some broken trust. And after a short time of working with me, she said, "I realized I haven't been talking about the wrong that he did. In fact, I haven't really been thinking about it much since we've been talking and doing this work." And that was a big indicator to me, because of her mind and her muscles and her mouth, that she had moved the ball forward in her ability to forgive her boyfriend and, in a lot of ways, experience a very different kind of relationship because of the power of forgiveness. Now, here's the bottom line, and here's what I need you to know. Forgiveness is almost impossible on our own. Jesus has this moment with a woman who comes into a dinner party, and everyone else is really thinking badly about her, looking down on her. But she walks straight to his feet and falls down and starts crying and wiping his feet with her hair. Knowing the thoughts of others that are looking down on this woman, he tells a parable to the men, judgmental, condemning men around. And he says, "Hey guys, let's say somebody owed $5. Obviously, Jesus didn't use US dollars, but he was talking in his terms of his time. Let's say a guy owed $5 and another guy owed $50,000. Okay? Both of their debts were forgiven. Who do you think would be more grateful?" And all of them, with clear sense about them, said, "Well, obviously the guy who owed $50,000, even more than the guy who owed $5. And he said, "In the same way, I came in here and none of you treated me so well like this woman. But she came in here and she washed my feet with her tears and with her hair." His point was this: those who know that they've been forgiven a lot love a lot. But when you don't really think there's much that needs to be forgiven, you're not going to love very much. And you're not going to have a capacity that's very big to forgive others. This is the beauty of what Jesus does for us. When we recognize how deeply our sin runs, and we don't get stuck there just feeling bad for ourselves, but when we recognize how deep the love of God is, and the mercy of God is, and the grace of God is to forgive us all of the wrongdoing that we've done to God and to other people in our life. When we recognize that, then we are able to operate from it. You will not be able to forgive others until you truly recognize how much you have been forgiven. That is a key. I want you to be emotionally free. I want your heart to be light and your life to be full. And so if you're watching this on YouTube, I want you to leave a comment and I want you to let me know who it is that you need to forgive. Okay? Be bold. Now, don't tag them necessarily. We're not trying to put people's business out on the internet. But I want you to tell me, it's my cousin, or it's my dad, or it's those kinds of terms, right? And here's what I want to invite all of you all to do is I want you to go to emotionalbreakthroughbootcamp.com, and I want you to sign up for our next bootcamp. This is an experience, live 3 days, where we start to really begin to break the patterns that are keeping us from being emotionally free and fully alive. And so I can't wait to see you there. But remember this, because you have been forgiven, you are able to forgive. Yes, even the most grievous wrongs that have been done or said to you. And when you forgive, remember, it's recognizing that wrong was done, but releasing your revenge. When you forgive, you let God bring his justice to the situation, and you are able to live with a lighter heart and a life that is more emotionally free. God bless, friend. Bye for now.